today's topic is obligation. And I'm thinking about how many things we do uh, due to obligation or feeling obligated. And around the holidays, sometimes there are gatherings or visits, less so this year, I imagine, but things that feel like we're doing them because they're obligatory. So I thought we could talk about that today and moving into a place of choice. But before we get started, let's take a minute to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clear, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, and nourishing all your cells and all your organs. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine brilliant, bright light just lighting you up. Every molecule, every electron just electrifying you and energizing you. And as you exhale, exhale any stuckness, any tension. And now let's just gently press our palms together and really softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel how awesome that tickling and tingling and softness is. And bring yourselves present to your body right here, right now. Welcome, 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 Miguel. Welcome to everybody who's joining us. Great to have you here. And today we're talking about obligation. And, um, you know, I, I know a lot of us live in the realm of have to, I have to do this, I have to do that. You know, I have family obligations, I have all kinds of other responsibilities. Hello, Irma, welcome. How awesome to have you here. So we're talking about obligation and obligations that we feel burdened by, you know, like that we begrudgingly choose to do certain things that that we don't really want to do. And the operative word here is choose, because ultimately we don't do anything because we have to. Ultimately, we are choosing to do the things that we do, even if we're doing it and saying that we don't want to, you know, but we're doing it begrudgingly. And so what I would like to talk about with you guys today is how we can take ownership. And if I have a family obligation that I don't want to fulfill, I actually have some choices in the matter. Okay. I have ultimate choice in the matter. I can choose to go or fulfill this obligation, and I can choose not to. And hello, Catherine. Welcome back. It's great to see you here. Um, wow, wow. So, good morning. Want to praise God for my husband Rick's cancer-free pathology report. We are so blessed. Catherine, thank you so much for sharing that. Congratulations. What a wonderful Thanksgiving gift, right? And lots to give thanks for there. Beautiful. So we're talking about obligation and how when we fulfill our obligations, even if we're fulfilling them begrudgingly, the truth is that we're choosing to do that. And so when we acknowledge that we actually have a choice, then it shifts the dynamic of of our experience, you know, because we can actually take ownership of that choice. So now you might say, no, I really don't have a choice. I really do have to fulfill those obligations, or this particular obligation. I really don't have a choice. Well, that's not true. The truth is that you may find that the consequences of not making that choice are worse than the consequences of making that choice. So, hello and good afternoon to you, Hope. It's great to have you here. So, what we're looking at is really taking ownership of ourselves and our choices in life. When we say, I'm doing it out of obligation, uh, that's a way that we often disempower ourselves and strip ourselves of the truth that we are actually making choices. So, so for instance, let's say I remember as a kid, we had family gatherings, and I wasn't really thrilled about going to the family gathering, and I would go and maybe go begrudgingly. And looking back and from this vantage point, what I did was I chose to go because the consequence of not going or making a fuss about it was way worse than actually going to the event. So sometimes we get to choose between not such great options. But the thing is that when we choose, when we consciously choose, first of all, we can get in alignment with our choice. So recognizing that I'm choosing to go to this event that I don't want to go to or that I didn't want to go to, I can now, hello, Tammy, welcome. Great to have you here. I can now align myself to the choice and say, okay, I'm choosing to go. And since I'm choosing to go, I can align myself with it so that I can actually be present. I can choose to go and enjoy the opportunity, or I can choose to go and be miserable. But why bother being miserable, right? So if we recognize that we are always at choice in one way or another to differing degrees, maybe a choice between things that none of which are optimal. Still, we have choices, right? And so when we choose to fulfill an obligation or a responsibility, or realize that we are defining or accepting the definition of that thing as the obligation and responsibility. So we're choosing to take on an obligation, or we're choosing to take on a responsibility. And there is tremendous power in making that choice, because it brings us back to our sovereignty. It brings us back to our self-empowerment. And hello, Isabel, welcome. Great to have you here. It's a party today. What a treat to have everybody here. And we're celebrating Catherine's husband's cancer-free pathology report. So yes, it's great to have you all here. So choice. Where in your life have you had obligations and responsibilities that you felt burdened by, that perhaps you can unburden yourself through making conscious choice and choosing the direction that life is going? I remember years and years ago, I took a training that at the time, it was called EST actually, and then it evolved into Landmark Education and the Forum. And one of the things that they said in that training from so long ago, I still get revelations from it, which is wild. But one of the things that they said is that it's easier to ride the horse in the direction that it's going. And so when we have obligations and responsibilities, or things that we're defining as obligations and responsibilities, uh, we get to choose them. And in other words, ride the horse in the direction that it's going. If indeed you're accepting an obligation or a responsibility, then allow yourself to be engaged in it. Allow yourself to really take ownership of it. It's like, okay, if I'm going to go to this event, or if I'm going to do this thing, then I'm going to be there. I'm going to be present. I'm going to participate, and you could choose to go and not participate as well. And that's a deliberate and conscious choice. So the idea here is to bring consciousness and awareness to the way that we interact with the world. When we talk about I'm obligated, or I feel obligated, realize that that's something that we're taking on, and access that place of presence to the choice, and realize that that it is your choice, right? And I have had intense conversations around this topic, where I've spoken with other family members, for instance, who have said, I don't have a choice. I have no choice. And there is such power in saying, I do have a choice. I do have a choice with pretty much everything. I have a choice of how to think about it. I have a choice about how to presence myself to it. I have a choice about how engaged I'm going to be. And so the point of this is that with obligation and responsibilities, we often take them on as a burden and experience ourselves as victims, as at the effect of these circumstances that may present themselves in our lives. And by finding that choice point, we can come back to our own sovereignty. This is something that I talk about a lot, is sovereignty and freedom. And it is through exercising choice that we exercise our freedom. And when we are at the effect of circumstance, we are not coming from a place of choice. So I'm wondering, as you feel into yourself, look at a situation where you might feel obligated and maybe burdened, and just sort of feel into that in your body, where you feel like you don't have a choice about something. And allow yourself, as you feel into that, to feel into, I am choosing. I am choosing. And I am choosing to take this on. And it may still be a heavy feeling, but my bet is that it's lighter to a certain degree, that it's lightened up, like that instead of your shoulders being burdened, you can stand up more straight and be in that point of choice. I am choosing. So I'm curious if you can give me some feedback. What is that like for you to recognize, or to allow yourself the experience of choosing, choosing the challenge of whatever it is? So Tammy says, and thanks for chiming in, Tammy, I always feel obligated with my kids' things. So realize that feeling, actually, I so appreciate the way you phrased that, Tammy, because you said you feel obligated, right? And so that feeling of obligation is sort of a feeling of being of oppression, right? It's like a burden. And when we recognize that we're choosing the choices that we felt obligated by, then you actually can entertain different options, possibly. Like you could entertain the option of not doing whatever it is related to the kids, or you can realize that you're choosing it and then engage with it from a completely different place. Because when we feel obligated, we often feel resentful, right? Obligation after obligation can breed resentment. Catherine says, lately, with all that's going on, being home, taking time out, I feel, and I think maybe it got cut off, Catherine, because I don't see the whole thing. But I'm guessing that you feel obligated about certain things. And when we, let me see what you're saying, is a way to get to a time of, I'm not sure what that last word is, maybe prayer, I'm not sure. When we connect to the place of choice, a place of peace. Thank you, Catherine. So taking time out, I feel, is a way to get to a place of peace, or a time of peace. Yes. So what we're talking about here with obligation and choice is there is, in my experience, I'm wondering if you're noticing this as you're feeling into this idea of making choice, there is a greater sense of peace. There is a greater sense of self-direction, because it is a choice I get to make. So what we're doing in bringing ourselves into greater alignment with ourselves is, it's a mindfulness kind of practice to recognize, I'm choosing this. I am choosing this at this moment. You know, I am choosing to do this thing. I am choosing to, I'm inclined to say I'm choosing to feel this way. And in a certain way, we do choose the way we feel about things. And that is largely generated by the way we think about things and the way the stories or the narrative that we have going about things. So we can shift our experience by shifting the way we think, which is really what this whole conversation is about, is thinking differently about what we were previously calling obligation and responsibility. So if I have obligations and responsibilities, I am owning them. I'm saying I am choosing this as an obligation. And I don't know if that necessarily helps us to like it more, but I think it empowers us regardless. So Catherine says, some will not like your choice, but in time, all will align to their peace. So it's always the case that some people will not align with your choice, right? It's always the case. And we need to make choices that we can live with. We need to make choices that we can be aligned with. And if we make a choice and we don't feel aligned with it, then we get to look at another choice. And Irma says, if I choose because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so that's a great point, Irma, because in obligation, we are doing things because it's the right thing to do. But who says it's the right thing to do? We do. Ultimately, we're the ones that say it's the right thing to do. So I'm choosing to do this because it's the right thing to do. And what does that give me in that choice? What it gives me in that choice is feeling like a good person, or feeling like I'm doing the right thing, right? What does it do for me? I'm choosing to do the right thing because then I get to think a certain way about myself, right? In doing the right thing, I feel good about it because I'm staying in alignment with my idea of who I am and how I should behave. Okay, so we get to say, when we look at doing something because it's the right thing to do, we get to look at who says it's the right thing to do. And oftentimes when we ask that question of who says, we realize that it wasn't us, that we kind of inherited this idea of morality or principles or values that may not be aligned with our own values. And so we get to look at that too. And this is part of our own conscious awareness, like what's the right thing to do? And actually, this brings me into thinking about suffering, because I think suffering is very much tied into obligation and responsibility in our culture. We tend to believe that there's merit to suffering. And we tend to, you know, to elevate suffering as a virtue, where I'm not so sure that that's really the truth. I think that when I'm suffering through my obligations or my responsibilities, well, that's kind of divesting ourselves of our responsibility, our autonomy, uh, our sovereignty, right? When I do something because it's the right thing to do, I get to choose what's the right thing to do. I get to choose what I'm embracing as the right thing to do. And that's a really important thing to recognize. So if the right thing to do is dictated by our family or by our church or by our government, we get to also look at, is that the right thing to do? And what are the consequences of choosing that versus choosing something else? And so if we're choosing to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but it costs us our health and our emotional well-being, is it the right thing? And we get to look at these questions. It's really important. So Ross says, I feel obligated to call my dad, even if our conversations end up with him implying I don't do enough. My energy gets low after the call, often. So Ross, you get to evaluate that obligation and convert it to choice. And if you realize that you're choosing to call your dad, even though he does what he does, realize that you're choosing it, maybe it'll shift the impact on your energy, because you can be choosing to be having the conversation with him. And you might even change the conversation. You might even address the implications that he's making that you don't do enough, or who knows. But if you choose that conversation, I wonder what will change for you, rather than feeling obligated. Because my guess is that if you feel obligated, you're already going into that that conversation feeling like, oh, okay, I'm going to call my dad. So the energy gets low in anticipation, perhaps, of the conversation. And if you choose to have that conversation, you can look at what's underneath that feeling of obligation. You know, like, why do you feel obligated to call your dad? You know, and look at what you're getting from fulfilling that, making that choice. Find out what what's the goodness in that choice that you're getting. And then that may help to enliven you, and it may help to give you more energy. And it may help you also to not be as susceptible to whatever his judgment is, because he's just doing his thing. Okay, that's just his opinion. And hopefully that helps. Tammy, thank you. Tammy says your insight's so appreciated. Thank you. Well, I think so many of us have lived through a sense of obligation and responsibility and doing the right thing, and the thing that has been missing from that is that we have experienced it as an um, external force rather than an internal choice. Catherine, thank you for being here. I so appreciate that. It makes a difference. That some of this stuff can be helpful. I have found that it makes a huge difference for me in my experience of my life to own my choices, to own that I have the freedom to choose. And at every moment, when we presence ourselves to the opportunity to choose, then it shifts the whole dynamic of life. And so um, we're on the verge of Thanksgiving, and I am going to be here tomorrow. I don't know if you will, but in case you're not, I want to wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I hope that all of us will take the time to really presence ourselves to how much there is to be grateful for, even in the midst, and maybe especially in the midst of this global pandemic and disruption of monumental proportions in um, in human history. So, Catherine, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. Anyway, lots and lots of love to you, and a wonderful Thanksgiving. Please make it a holiday for yourselves. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I'm here going live every weekday morning on Enlightened World Network's Facebook page. And I invite you and encourage you to check out the other programming on Enlightened World Network. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you guys so much for being here and playing with me today. Lots of love.